Good morning. Thank you for coming to the AAPI exhibit part 2. This is the last installment for the museums for the Asian American Pacific Islander exhibit. The first part actually goes over a little summary of what we had in part 1, and then we also expand into post-1945. Of course, we have the history of the Asian immigration into the United States, which actually started with the Filipinos back in the 1850s or 1587. We have the map, we have a little history, we have a Japanese kimono, it shows the Japanese heritage. We also have a Chinese junk showing many of them coming over as immigrants on that. Even though the Filipinos were predecessors because they were the sailors that came here first. We then have the agriculture exhibit, which shows the variety of the Asian foods that were brought in and expanded the availability of foods in the Americas. We brought in oranges, we brought in lettuce, we brought in strawberries, we brought in lemons, peaches, and also the Bing cherry, which was named after a Chinese person that founded the Bing cherries. We also have a little display here on Larry Itliong. He's one of the first Filipinos came here that organized the farm laborers throughout the valley. The Filipinos actually were more laborers, so they didn't establish communities within the cities. They were migrant workers, similar to the Hispanics are now. So they were actually the starting organizations before Cesar Chavez came in and took over and made it the UFW. Before that, they were called AWOC, mostly Filipino Americans. And then Cesar Chavez took it and expanded it. And of course, we have the movement as it is now. We also have a history of some past Asian Japanese farmers in Kings County in particular. They grew a variety of crops. They tried everything. They first tried the crops like peaches and oranges, and it just wasn't too wet at that time because of the high water tables. So they actually switched to more productive crops, which were walnuts, cotton, grapes, and pistachios, those other ones. We had a variety of Japanese farmers when they first came here after the war. Many of their predecessors bought land before the war, so they were actually able to keep it due to the generosity of other Caucasian farmers that preserved the farms for them. Many started farming when they came back because that was part of their tradition, because they knew how to clear the swamplands and grow crops. Unfortunately, a lot of them are no longer in the farming because the children grew up, got an education, and moved away or decided to seek other occupations. We are lucky enough to have the Mia family, which is still a family working farm, and we also have the Nishi farm. So those are the two major farms here in Kings County that still belong to Japanese Americans. A lot of people don't know that when the Japanese Americans were evacuated as 9066 had ordered them to leave the state of California, you were only allowed to take what you could carry. So a lot of them had these suitcases, and actually a couple of the pieces are original pieces. If you take a look at the first one, that's the original War Relocation Authority tag that Naomi Tagawa had on that little satchel. It was paper, so you can see how old it is. What we have here in the middle is a concrete bowl that was loaned to us from the Simpson Garden. It was actually made in one of the relocation camps. They're still tracing down the history, but it was made in one of the camps. And if you're ever interested in how people reacted to being relocated, if you look at Silent Sacrifice, which was produced by Outside Beyond the Lens, Jeff Aiello took a couple from, I believe it was Dinuba, out to Jerome, and they revisited the site where they were incarcerated or relocated in one of the concentration camps. They actually had the premiere here at the Clovis Veterans Memorial Building. What we have here is the discrimination section, where we have discrimination against all Asians, Chinese, Filipinos, Japanese, and probably Southeast Asians at this point. As you can see, we have the I'm American, and that was from the anti-Japanese discrimination. We also have Executive Order 9066, which called for all the Japanese Americans from the West Coast to be evacuated and taken out of state. The picture that we have here was also in Exhibit 1. It's a picture of all the youth in the central San Joaquin Valley. in October of 1941, 6 months before Executive Order 9066 removed all of them from California. These kids mostly went to Jerome or Arkansas or to Arizona. They used to gather once a year at conferences. This was actually in front of the Hanford Auditorium. There were children and teenagers from all over the Central Valley, Bakersfield, Dos Palos, Curators, Bowles. They all had their little signs, and these would probably be grandparents to the people that were actually the kids nowadays, and the young adults. So we also have the discrimination against the Chinese. We have all the Chinese anti-Asian acts. So there's always been discrimination throughout the years.
This display focuses on the Mazzotte family's history and their business Sunset Garage. It began when Roy Mazzotte came here at the age of 7, and he settled in Hanford, and eventually he opened up his garage, Sunset Garage. The interesting story we just came off talking about the discrimination, when his family was interred during the World War II, he was in charge of the garage at the camp, and when he received notice that the person who he left all of his tools with for his business was also being enlisted in the Army, so he was granted 30 days to find someone else and somewhere else to take care of his business tools. But when the war was over and he and his family returned to Hanford, he was very concerned about reopening his business. And he just thought, well, I'll just do it out of my home. I'm not going to open up a garage again. And soon his old customers followed and new customers came, and there were cars lined up all up and down the street. So he opened up his business back up on 7th Street. His son, Walt, joined the forces of the Sunset Garage when he was 14 years old, and he continued his business until 2009. Here we've highlighted several of the businesses that were owned by Asians in Hanford and Lemoore. Most notably is the Star Cafe, which was also featured in Phase 1. It is the oldest restaurant here we have running in Hanford that's been in continuous operation. This display covers the grocery stores that were in the local area that were owned by Chinese Americans. It's interesting that they were mom and pop businesses, and they weren't just Chinese grocery stores. They served the community, and there were quite a few of them for this being such a small area. And I would like to read the names of them because I think for posterity, these businesses should be recognized because many of them had longevity and some of them are still going. There was Gong's Market on 10th Avenue, Lincoln Market in Lemoore that was run by the Lee family, RNN Market, State Market, which was run by the Young family, Superway, which was run by the Lee family, United Market, which was run by the Lowe family, Valley Mart, Wings Market, and Ying's Market. This display covers the story of the Imperial Dynasty, which actually began with Phase 1 when we talked about Gong Ting Shu and his noodle house that was located on China Alley. Fast forward to 1958 when Gong Ting Shu's grandson, Richard C. Wing, and his family, the rest of the Wing family, opened the Imperial Dynasty. Richard had served in World War II with General George C. Marshall, where he traveled the world with General Marshall and was in the kitchens of all kinds of great chefs, including Madame Chiang Kai-shek's kitchen, where he learned to do a double consommé, which he incorporated into his own menu later on. His brother Ernest started the wine cellar, which eventually won 8 Grand Spectator Awards until they stopped entering it because Richard felt it was sort of overkill because they kept winning, and he wanted to give other restaurants a chance to have a Grand Spectator Award. They won the Cordon Bleu Award twice for their preparation of escargot. We have on display numerous awards and articles that the restaurant was known worldwide. It brought visitors in all over the world. It had a great ride. It had 4 banquet rooms, including 4 dining rooms, and it was an anomaly for this town in that time of year. And I would like to say that I'm very proud to have come from that family, and that we had such a great ride that I'm really grateful that this community supported us and still misses it. I like hearing all the stories. I'm seated at a display that we created that replicates what we called the gourmet dinner. Richard Wing had an off-the-menu 8-course meal that was paired with a wine for 7 of the courses. And here we have a display of the escargot. And Richard, because of his time in the service, he was very exact on how you set the table. And I'm very proud that I remembered how to set the table, and I think I'd have it measured perfectly. But over here, we have the menu that was the gourmet dinner. And we started off with a salmon and filet mignon steak tartare, and it was usually served with a champagne. And then there was escargot, and then soup, and this one has a lobster course, and then I can't read his handwriting. It is, I believe this is a duck a la chinoise, Chateaubriand, and then it's salad, and it finished with a creme de cacao Ariane, and he named it after me because I made it. And here's a picture of all the courses, the 8 courses. As I mentioned, the wine cellar was very well known, and people came to eat at the Imperial Dynasty, but the wine cellar was also a feature point. These tables were made from wine crates from the Imperial Dynasty restaurant, and they were created by Dr. Robert Jensen. And over here, Richard was married to Miss Hong Kong, 1964, and this is one of Mary Wing's gowns that she had during her reign as Miss Hong Kong. And on this guy, we have Richard Wing's Chef White's. This is his jacket. As mentioned in Phase 1, the King's Hand Laundry building was built by the Tagawa family in 1911. In 2017, Naomi Tagawa donated the building to the China Alley Preservation Society. Currently, the society is restoring the King's Hand Laundry building. When we first acquired the building, it was not built on a foundation. It was sitting on dirt. So we had to raise the building up and put in a foundation. And currently, we're restoring the front porch and the balcony. And right now, we are concluding that phase and adding on the handicap railing.
Henry Sugimoto is a well-known artist that was actually born in Japan. His father came to California, actually worked in Kings County as a laborer, saved money to bring his wife over, eventually brought Henry and his brother over from Japan to be with the family. In the meantime, while he was still in Japan, he was raised by her mother's family, which is actually of samurai descent. He was one of the last samurai that was actually sent out to the countryside to live since he could no longer be a samurai. So he had all sorts of paintings and art that Henry was able to draw from, and the grandfather encouraged him to look at the art and appreciate it. So he learned the art of wood prints, which means that you draw a picture on a light piece of paper like a wax paper or vellum. You draw your positive image, you'd stain it, and you'd put it on a plank of wood and start chiseling with a hammer and a chisel, or actually a mallet, because you have to use something that's soft. So he learned the art of printmaking. This he used when he went to Jerome, Arkansas, because he was in Kings County. He was interred with the Tagawa family in Jerome, Arkansas. He actually started out from here. He graduated in Kings County in Hanford because he wanted to learn English. And Max Nichols' father took a shine to him, got him into Berkeley, into the dental school. He decided he didn't want to be a dentist. His passion was with art. So he graduated with an art degree, went to Europe, studied art, came back during the Depression because his parents needed help, And so he came back to Kings County and actually wound up marrying Naomi's sister, Susie. So, and he actually helped in the laundry at that point. Still did art, taught art classes at Hanford High School, taught art classes after school, actually taught Japanese classes at the Buddhist church at that time before the war. After the war, he was relocated with the family to Jerome, Arkansas, the Tagawa family, and that's where he made these prints as a memorial to what happened in the relocation camps. Actually, this wood print is the same as this print here. You can see that he's got Hanford High here. He has the storms outside of Arkansas, how bad the weather was. This is his daughter, Madeline, and it's about the newspaper that you have that he's looking at it and listening to the radio. And of course, his parents in the back. So he's very descriptive on how he did these drawings. So if you want to take a look at historical documents on what life was in Jerome, his is a great example, and they're all preserved. He did very few in color. This is one of the few that he did in color. This one here is probably one of my favorites. It shows everything in Arkansas. It shows the rattlesnakes you had there. It shows the sunflower, which is the state flower for Arkansas. It shows the guard tower. It shows the tanks, and it shows the lightning. It basically is a historical document of everything that went on in Jerome. So you can see that the families, when the sons came in from the service, they actually came to camp and met with the families and the blocks and the mess halls. This is also a picture of when a service member had died. The mothers made a scarf of like 1,000 stars. And so they're remembering the son that has passed. And of course, this one here shows the bad weather in Arkansas. So it's a very pictorial narrative of what happened in the relocation camps and how difficult life was then and how they managed to adapt and overcome and live. What we have here is a traditional Japanese konburi, or a carp. It's a streamer or windsock that the Japanese used to fly many, many years ago. It was basically traditionally flown for what they call Boys' Day in early May. This is made of cotton. It was handmade, hand printed. It's designed to represent a carp with all the fins, the eyes, and they drew all the scales. So you can imagine how tall the pole would have to be to accommodate flying something 16 feet tall. This is actually my brother's, and he was born here in United States in Hanford, and he always insisted that my parents take it down before the bus comes. He didn't want to have any questions on that, but it's still preserved and still in good shape. So, the carp presents courage and loyalty in the Japanese culture, and it was basically related to the samurai again. So it's a display of the children. Eventually they did incorporate Boys' Day to Children's Day, but this was a traditional thing that they would fly. And they would have multicolored carp depending on how many kids you had.
In this display, we acknowledge that both Lemoore and Hanford had Chinese mayors. We have Tim Lee of Lemoore, Danny Chin, and Stan Ham of Hanford.
Hanford also had a sister city in Japan. It was called Satana. It was located on the island of Hokkaido along the coast. They had established a relationship with Santana High School, which actually was a vocational school, when Bill Clark was asked to go over to their island to help them with the dairy industry. Once that relationship was established, the high schools decided to have a sister city relationship with the Hanford High School District. When the students came over here from Santana, they were surprised that we had an academic program because their programs were vocational, which focused on dairy, fishing, and farming. So that it was a whole new world for them. We had an exchange program from the 80s to the early or mid 1990s when Santana High School actually had closed due to a low attendance, and they actually merged with the Hokkaido School District. So unfortunately, this relationship has not been active for quite a few years, unfortunately, but it was very active, and we did send several students over there, and they did send several students over here as an exchange program. This was a gift from the city of Santana to the city of Hanford in appreciation for the sister city relationship.
On this display, we are featuring 4 of Hanford's prominent Chinese citizens. We have Judge Delbert Wong, Bessie Sue Liu, Henry Ban and Bessie Lowe, and Wellman Ju. This display tells the rest of the story of the Taoist temple. As we mentioned in phase 1, we talked about the history of the Taoist temple. Here we have what happened after May 12, 2021. The temple was heavily damaged by arson. We were very well insured for the building, which has been labeled structurally stable, but the Preservation Society is sadly lacking a lot of funds to restore the artifacts. We have had a lot of donations to help restore the artifacts, but it's going to be a bit of a long trip to do so. We have on video here, we have a short film called Rising, which is about the arson, and we also have another video by the National Trust for Historic Preservation. The arsonist was caught and sentenced, but much to our disappointment, the deputy DA made a deal with her, and she will be out in 2026. This display is about Camille Wing. The way I want to start about Camille Wing is that when she passed away, the Fox Theater put on the marquee, Camille Wing, Hanford thanks you. And I think that sentence alone sort of exemplifies her life. She started out, as we have here, she was a child and teenage actress, and this is her SAG card. But the rest of this is all about the many things she did for our community. She was she was instrumental in creating the historic district. She was on the Historic Resource Committee. She was on the committee that helped bring public television to our area. She was on the cemetery district, Chinese cemetery restoration. She was on the Historic Resource Commission, and she was a charter member of the Friends of the Library and a pioneer with the China Alley Preservation Society. And I think this picture of her with Freddie in the fire truck sort of, that's what she loved to do. She loved her community. I have to say, I think she loved her community as much as she loved us. The China Alley Preservation Society was formed in 1972 when there was much concern about when there was concern about the Taoist temple and what was going to happen to it and how it could be restored. And so a committee was formed, and in 1982, the Taoist temple had been restored and was open to the public. And here we have pictures of how colorful and how all the artifacts were polished and on display, and they are the original artifacts. They are from the 1880s. And as we mentioned a few frames ago, a lot of these artifacts were heavily damaged or just completely destroyed. Everything that was pewter just exploded. And so we have some pictures here of the arson. But one happy note that happened for China Alley and the Preservation Society is in 2011, the National Trust for Historic Preservation named China Alley as one of America's 11 most endangered historic places. And while it sounds really odd that, oh boy, we're endangered, yay, it helped the California condor, so we always think China Alley is going to live forever. In the 1990s, the U.S. Postal Service started doing a Chinese New Year stamp. And Camille Wing always thought, well, we should have an unveiling of the stamp in China Alley. So she contacted the postmistress, Joan Darling, and they were able to, in 2004, get the unveiling of the Chinese stamp in China Alley, which also made sense because in the Taoist temple, that's where a lot of the early Chinese pioneers accepted and received mail. Here we acknowledge that 3 Chinese young women were junior Miss contestants, and Stacy Lee broke the barrier. She was Miss Kings County in 1983. On this display, we have the restoration of the Chinese cemetery. The Chinese and the pioneer Chinese, they were not allowed to be buried in the regular cemeteries, so they had a cemetery of their own. And over the years, it became sort of, started to go into I don't know what you call it, but it started to, it wasn't well maintained. This cemetery district, when they were mowing the lawn, they just ran over all the headstones and all the altars and everything. It was just all a mishmash. But in the year 2000, some local community members got together and formed a Save the Chinese Cemetery, and they did it very nice now. They have they've made a new altar, and the cemetery district has agreed to maintain it so far. For over 45 years, the China Alley Preservation Society presented a Moon Festival on the first Saturday of October. We have the Cal Poly Lion Dance team performing the lion dance, and we also have Fresno Guno Taigo, and we have other cultural exhibits and displays. The Cal Poly team about 10 years ago donated one of the lions they were retiring. Actually, they donated 2 of the lions that they were retiring. And if you see that the lions, they're a little sad looking because but they did survive the arson, but they have a little bit of singe to them. But we haven't had to have Moon Festival since the arson, which was in 2021. So it was made me very glad and happy to have a tribute to the Moon Festival with the Carnegie Museum this year. In 1962, Audrey Leibold arrived in Hanford with her family, and she had an extensive theater background in Iowa. And she wanted to start a children's theater group. And so she went to the city of Hanford and she started one. It was quite successful. And so the city asked her, could you start an adult theater group? And she did. And they had the first 3 performances in Hanford High. And they soon realized they were going to outgrow the Hanford Theater and they needed a home of their own. One evening, Audrey Leibold and her husband Robert were dining at the Imperial Dynasty restaurant, and they asked chef owner Richard Wing, what about the old Chinese school? What's going on with that? So Richard got a key and a flashlight and showed it to the Leibolds, and that became the Temple Theater's home. And an agreement was drawn between the city of Hanford, the ancestors of the Chinese who built the Chinese school, and the King's Players. And they are still presenting plays 4 times a year. And we have here some of their programs and photographs of the plays.
This display shows you not all, but most of the major festivals that the Japanese in the United States celebrate, and still sometimes they celebrate wholeheartedly in Japan. We have here the kimono that is designed for the obon dancing. It's in full regalia as far as the equipment that you would use for dancing. They use hand gestures. They also will use the round fan, which is down here. They use a folding fan in one of the dances. They actually will use what's wrapped around her neck is a towel. They use a towel dance. The items that are tucked into her hobi, those are Okinawan, what we call kachi-kachis. Traditionally, there would be 2 sticks that we put together. The children also would use small ones like these red and blue ones, and they were called kachi-kachi because it sounded like firecrackers. So when you click them together, the wood made a sound like a firecracker. So that's part of the dance. We also have a child's outfit for the Obon festivals and probably some of the getas that you would wear. The Obon festivals are in the fall. It's in celebration of the harvest and celebration of the ancestors. So you'll find those dances throughout the communities, all throughout the whole world in the fall. And they'll rotate, and you'll find dancers from Fresno going to Visalia or Reedley or other communities to help them celebrate also. So it's an interesting thing. They play the taiko drum, they dance around in a circle, and they have music. We also have dolls here. That was in celebration of Dolls Day. Traditionally, you would put, before they combined the holidays, you would have a girls' day and a boys' day. So you'd put all the little dolls that the girls had, and you'd display them out there and celebrate your children, your girls in the family. They did eventually combine that with Boys' Day to make it Children's Day. So traditionally, the girls' days used to be in March, and the Boys' Day, which is over here, used to be in May. And now they're both celebrated in March. Boys' Day, you put all the dolls for the boys, representing the boys. Number 14 is actually a picture of Roy Mizote when he was a child. His parents took a picture of all the regalia around him when he was a young child. Number 16 is Tai Mizote's. collection of Boys' Day that he actually has in his office. And then you can see that they had the number 15 is the koi that they have flying. So you have the blue and you have different colors for other ages of the other kids. What we have in the middle here is what we call a hanamito. Hanamito is a flower exhibit. It's celebrated in April. It celebrates the birth of the Buddha in Lumbini's garden. So we have the Buddha standing there. The tradition is that you take sweet tea, which is actually in the vessel where the lotus flowers are, and you pour that over the Buddha to honor him. So since he was born in Lumbini's garden, the shrine is actually decorated in actual flowers. Unfortunately, flowers don't keep well for long periods of time, so we had to use artificial flowers. So we also have the incense offerings here below that. We also have the paper lanterns that some of the communities, if you have water around you, you would use to, on your ancestors, you would light them and have them float out in the water. Kings County doesn't really do that, but they do that at the Fresno Shinzen Garden, so every year, if you can participate in that, that's a great event. We also have New Year's, which is a big celebration. Everyone has food, all sorts of Japanese food. You go to everybody's house, you have sake to celebrate the new year, and tea, and basically all sorts of food. The old tradition was you would go from house to house and celebrate food and meals with multiple families. When I was growing up, I think we went to about 6 different houses. Unfortunately, that tradition has fallen away, just like a lot of other traditions. And we also have the Japanese doll, which is a dancing doll. And that's going to be probably found more traditional, being that decorative in Japan versus here in the States. This is a display on the Hanford Buddhist Church, which actually was started in 1905, way before the war. It did happen to survive past the war, which was lucky. We have up there the first picture, number 1, is the 25th anniversary of the church. Back then, you shot panoramic pictures of everybody. The second picture is the 50th anniversary. So we have celebrations of not only our own congregation, we have congregations from surrounding communities coming to help us celebrate. Number 3 and number 5 are pictures of children in these celebrations. They used to rent what we call chiba outfits. It's a celebration of the Buddhist religion, and you would put your children in costume. Actually, in the child, the little girl, there's a little headdress that goes, like if you were here in part 1, you would see that. Of course, that was my daughter. She was way too small to wear the headdress. And then these 2 children are Maureen Fukuda's son, Aaron, and Todd. And you can see that the celebration, we have the 50th anniversary there, the 1905 to 1985. Well, that's wrong, that's 75th, huh? We also have a publication on the inside that shows the different celebrations that we have. The church is actually coming on another anniversary in April of next year, 120. So we have survived all these years. Ken was generous enough to loan us, or actually donate the origami structures. So he actually will do appearances at the King's Library. Please go to see him. He's an excellent artisan in creating all these origami displays.
Here we have displayed 2 Chinese stringed instruments. These were on display in the Taoist Temple Museum, so they're quite old, but they survived the fire.
Asian Americans were also very active in sports here in Kings County, believe it or not. A lot of the Nisei farmers and the older Japanese were actually involved in Selma Fishing Club. Even though it had Selma as the name, it involved residents from Kings, Tulare, and Fresno counties. It was one of the passions that they all had, so they all went fishing together. There is also the current racing where they actually have sand drags. Larry Sakaguchi and Gary Sakaguchi were into that. They're from Hanford. So is Gary's son John, who lives in Clovis. We also have here Frank Okada. He was one of the mechanics that helped Tommy Trader run out at Marchbanks, which was little known. And we also have, again, the Nisei baseball. That's a picture of them actually trying to put out a fire out at Tom Fat Restaurant over in China Alley. The only reason we know who the player is because we can see his number on the back. We also have a picture of all the players once they came out of camp. Unfortunately, there's a lot of them that are unnamed because we don't have anyone around that can identify them, and they weren't identified at the time. They were also very active in the Hanford Bowling Association, which Buddy Jin actually sponsored Buddy's trophy team. My uncle, Sam Shinagan, was actually one of the avid bowlers. They actually would travel all up and down the state at bowling tournaments, and I found a patch where they won a 1955 tournament up in Sacramento.
Here we have for the 4 immigrations from the Philippines. It's actually started in, make sure I get this right, October 18th, 1587, when the Filipinos came over with the Spanish and they landed in Morro Bay. And there is actually a landmark there near Cole Park that everybody can visit when they do get a chance. It is a hit and miss, and it's also a blink and miss. Down here, and these banners were and are from the Fons Stockton Museum, and Fons stands for Filipino American National Historical Museum, and it's also a society. The main base is out of Seattle, Washington, and there's numerous chapters all across the United States. And there's actually 2 local chapters, one Central Valley and one is Delano chapter. In the middle here we have the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor, which was awarded to my great uncle Simplicio Tarad Sabaron. He was actually here in 1950s when he migrated through the Central Valley as a field worker. And recently we found out that he was actually on the outskirts of Stratford with the Portuguese family working their fields, which was very interesting. With the Congressional Gold Medal of Honor, it was a bill that was enacted in, I believe, 2015, I do apologize, in 2015. And in 2017, October of that year, is when the Filipinos that were fought in World War II, I apologize, were given this highest honor because they were not honored when they came over from the Philippines via Hawaii and landed in 3 different ports along the West Coast. So our Filipino ancestors are finally recognized, and we are continuing to try to honor them to this day. As for myself, I'm trying to honor my grandfather because he was a World War II veteran himself. And in this bay here, we have a display of the national Philippine flag, which is hanging vertical, I do believe. I always get those 2 confused. The flag itself here was adopted in June 12th of 1898. It has 3 main colors. It's blue, red, and white. Now the 3 5-pointed gold stars and also the 8-rayed gold sun. So with it being horizontal, if you have it horizontal, it symbolizes a willingness and sacrifice for oneself, for freedom. The red stripe symbolizes the courage, and the white of the triangles hosts symbolism of liberty. Now what you see in this display here, this is the correct way to display the flag at all times. If the red is to the west, that means it's war. But with this, since we haven't been, and I'm saying we as a whole because I am Filipino, we have not been at war for a while that I know of, this is the correct way to go about it. Catholics, the Philippines is made up of many religions, but Catholicism is the main one. Right now, they're in the middle of a Christmas Advent. It actually starts on the midnight of November 30th and runs until December 25th at midnight, which means they're symbolizing the returning and the arrival of Christ for his birthday. That's how they portray it. So they give up everything like they do with Lent for those 40 days. And here we have, they also do altars, which they pray to. Some Catholics that I know of pray to them every day, 3 times a day, or on Sundays. They love their statues, their rosaries. Santo Niño, which I apologize is very small, but he is a symbolism of the Catholic faith. And then in front of this, we also have the Sungka game, I don't know exactly how that works because I was taught not to touch it because it was an elder female game. I do believe it has something to do with strategy. And then we have the brooms. Filipinos, I just found out recently, have 2 brooms, one for inside and one for outside. What the basis of that is, I am not sure. I've been given different stories. Here we have traditional Filipino attire. You see the man and the little girl here. These were also loaned to us from the Fawn Stockton Museum from Erwin Mina. He is the president and from Delano, California. And then these are the traditional dresses of the little girls and the gentleman. The mannequin is wearing a barong. That's the traditional for weddings, funerals, any type of celebrations. With the Filipiniana dress that we have here, it was actually made in 1950 in the Philippines in Cebu. My grandmother Lola came over. When she came over here, she brought it with her and her husband. So this is a very traditional dress that's done at celebrations, weddings. I don't know if they do it at funerals, baptisms. They also do it with the dances as well.
So most Hmong Americans came over in the late 70s, early 80s, and that is all because of the Vietnam War. My dad actually was recruited in the early 70s, back when the CIA was doing their guerrilla warfare and doing a lot of background work. They actually went and found some of the Hmong people that live in that rural area, and they had them help them figure out the rural terrain in order to actually fight during the war. So my dad was actually recruited. He was probably only like 14 years old at that time. My grandpa was actually the only male that was at that house. So when they had recruited them, they actually asked for my dad to come over to do it. So after the Vietnam War, my dad was actually sponsored to come over to California. And just like many of the Asian Americans here, they did chain migration in order to come over. So my dad then sponsored his dad, and then his dad sponsored the brothers to come over to California. Many of the Hmong people, when they came over after the Vietnam War, were all scattered throughout the United States. And Hmong people kind of love being communal. So there's actually large groups of Hmong people in the Central Valley area, specifically Fresno, and there's a lot in Minnesota and a lot in Wisconsin. Okay, so this is just some of the regional clothes that they have, because Hmong people are not only in the Laos and Thailand area, which most of them are now, you can still find them in the South China area. So the outfits determine which area you're at and also what clan you're part of. So the Hmong people, there's 18 clans, and they're all based off of last name. So depending on who you marry, that is the outfit that you wear when you get married. So in the back here is actually my dad's traditional wear stuff. And if you look at the very, very back one, the woman on the left-hand side, you could tell that that embroidery is all hand done. The embroidery is really, really important. Some of the stuff that you get when you get married is like all the clothes and all of the things that your parents have prepared for you for like years before you get married. But if you actually look, the men outfit is actually now a machine-made outfit. You can't really tell from far away, but up close you can tell that there's a difference. The artisans that were of the past is something that's going to be missing one day. If you even look at the hats that tell you what kind of clothing and the dress that you wear, the differences between even the minuteness of the batik or the minuteness of the reverse applique, it's completely different now because they have reverted to things that are now machine made. So those kinds of things, those artifacts that we get from the past are so very, very important to us. And I still have all of my things that I've gotten. But we all know that it really is a dying art now. And many of the people, because we now live in the United States, that's just not something that they are practicing anymore.
This display is different from the first exhibit that we had, where a lot of the Asians, especially the Japanese, were not allowed to join the military forces at the beginning of World War II. We were excluded, the Japanese were excluded from joining any military service and given an other than honorable discharge from every branch of the service except for the Army, who learned how to utilize the speakers in Japanese language and also found that they were wholehearted fighters that committed to preserving the United States and the freedom in the 442 in the European theater, and also in the military intelligence service in the Pacific. This one here shows that all the branches of service after the war allowed Asian Americans to be enlisted in their service. So they were able to enlist in the Army, the Navy, the Air Force, Coast Guard. And so these are the memorials that the communities have made for the veterans. So it's honoring the service that they had, the memorials that are now dedicated to them. And the most recent here would be the one in Corcoran, the 5 Pillars of Freedom. We also have the memorial halls in Hanford, Avenel, Lemoore, and Corcoran. This exhibit is dedicated to the Nisei Liberty Post 5869, which was actually in Hanford. My dad was one of the founding members. There were 21 founding members from the Japanese American community. This club, or this chapter, was started because when they returned back from war, anyone that was non-white could not join the regular VFW. They were barred, they were discriminated against. So there was a gentleman that was actually going to be in the higher levels of, or was going to be a state commander with the VFW. He actually advocated that the Nisei Americans be allowed to establish their own separate units. So that's where many of the units for the Liberty Posts or the Nisei Posts were established. They all have different names. They were all started by people from either the Military Intelligence Service or from the 442. Unfortunately, a lot of the branches are closing because they don't have the membership, which is sad, but they are an essential part of the history, and even though they don't have any Japanese members, they still should honor the 442 and the veterans that served to establish the post and keep it alive. The VFW in Hanford is still currently in operation. They just celebrated their 75th anniversary. They've done a lot of things for the community. They've actually established the War Memorial up in Fresno, up at Woodward Park, where they actually have the veteran service. They have a veteran service every Memorial Day. And these are 9 of the founding members that we were actually able to get photographs of. So if you can support the VFW, please do that. This exhibit is a display of the various forms of martial arts that are connected with Asian Americans. We have generously been loaned some of the pieces that are in here. This gi is from the Gracie Jiu-Jitsu from Corcoran, the elite Jiu-Jitsu. We have the Kendo outfit, where you actually have the little fighting sticks. We have the Kelley sticks, and we have the butterfly knives from the Filipino culture. We also have the nunchucks, which are actually related to the Filipino and the Chinese martial arts. We actually have a butterfly gi, the top of that, which is connected more with Bruce Lee. There's actually a picture in one of his Bruce Lee Filipino martial arts book. The gentleman in the front row, he is from Hanford, so there is a local connection. We weren't able to actually confirm his name, but that's one of the few pictures where Bruce Lee is actually photographed in a group photo. If you take a good look at it, it's called Filipino Martial Arts. You will see Bruce, and you'll see Brandon as a little boy, and you'll see his wife, Brenda, actually standing in the background. We also have a katana, which is a Japanese sword, and of course, yoga and meditation is related to Asian martial arts. The Asian martial arts, if you take a look at it, a lot of the equipment was banned. So as the Asians were revolting. They were banned from having martial art, for instruments of weapons. So the only people that could have instruments were actually farmers. So a lot of the instruments originated from farming equipment, like the axe, the chip, the sickles. What we have here is a homemade barong from the Philippines or Taiwan, in that area. So they were all handmade. The barong was actually, the bola was actually used in the Philippines to fight the war in World War II. The Filipinos that fought for the US, they used those to clear the brush. And those were all handmade, usually with wooden handles. So they were very instrumental in helping the armed forces cut through the brush. Many of these martial arts are still in existence throughout Kings and Tulare and Fresno County. So they teach discipline, they teach structure, and it's amazing what it will do for young children also that need a diversion and learn how to have them cope with everything that's going on in society. So if you can, please look into martial arts. This display was generously loaned to us from the Fresno Shinzen Garden. We could not acquire a bonsai tree due to its delicate nature and for the duration of our exhibit, so they were generously put together this exhibit for us, which is a tokomona display. It's a display that some houses will have just as a place of serenity. It will change according to the holidays or the seasons. They have the serenity of just a single rock in a facility. This scroll is a serene scene of cranes flying through fall or through the clouded skies. So they'll hang scrolls, they can have displays, but you can have a small plant there or a stone, just something just shows someplace where you can meditate and have a place of serenity. It will be in a lot of houses, businesses of Asian ancestry.
This is Hotai, also known as the Laughing Buddha. He represents happiness and contentment, and it is said that if you rub his belly, it'll bring you good luck.
This display, it shows an example of all the different Asian cultures that are present in Kings County today. They're a very silent majority that really doesn't make themselves well known. We have some Vietnamese here, which we have the dress and the traditional hat from Vietnam. These cups are also Vietnamese. The lotus flower is the national flower for Vietnam. We have people from Cambodia, we have people from Thailand, we have people from South Korea, Okinawa, and of course Thailand. They're all intermixed within the county doing various jobs, and they really aren't very pronounced, but if you talk to them well enough, you'll find that, that we're very diverse in the Asian cultures. Unfortunately, they were not able to come in and contribute to our display. A lot of these cultures fled their native countries, or their ancestors fled due to conditions that proved fatal if they had stayed in the country. So a lot of them left with nothing and basically had to start their lives all over in the United States once they arrived here. So we wanted to celebrate their presence here in the county also. This is a board that shows where our ancestors came from. It's actually labeled Pinpoint Your Ancestors. Many of the visitors here were able to look at the map, see where their ancestors from, and put a pin in that area to show that this is how Asian Americans originated in the Asian culture. So we have the Philippines, we have China, we have Japan. So you can see all the different people that have come through, pinpointing where their relatives came from. So we'd like to thank the Carnegie Museum for the opportunity to showcase the Asian American experience in Kings County, not only in California, how we migrated to the United States, coming into California, and again funneling that down into who is actually here and have shared their culture and influenced how Kings County has evolved.